How to Build a Computer by Baer. So the first thing that we need to do is take inventory. We need to make sure you have all the parts needed to build your computer and set them out. And then prior to building a computer, you need to make sure all the parts are compatible. You can do that by going online and checking the power supply and make sure it fits with the motherboard and the CPU, etc., etc.
Hello everyone, my name is Baer, and I'm going to show you how to build a computer. Now I found this computer at a yard sale and I had a bunch of parts to it and it was really dirty. So what I did is I cleaned it up, and you can use your typical paper towels, just make sure everything's unplugged and everything like that, and took everything apart. Also, I used a compressed gas duster, which is really good at getting all the dust off of it. But we have all the parts that we're going to use to build our computer. So I used a bunch of old things. So right here we have your media card, multimedia card. There's your RAM. There's your hard drive. Back there is a fan, a bunch of screws and utilities. There's your SATA cables. Most computers nowadays are going to use SATA cables. And those are the cables that come with the case. That's your power supply unit, your PSU, which is right here. And that's a network card that I had. That's your CD-ROM or DVD-ROM drive, actually. And then this is your motherboard, and the CPU is already onto it, already attached to it. So these are the parts that we're going to use to build a computer.
So the first thing that we need to do is to use the motherboard and put it in onto the computer case and put it in there first. Now this one already has a CPU attached, otherwise we would probably go ahead and do that once the motherboard is attached. So what we do is we line the motherboard up with the holes on the back, and then we start screwing in the screws. Now not all computer cases will have available spaces for the screws. What I mean by that is this motherboard has, I believe, 10 slots for screws, but the case itself only has 8. So 8 should be able to hold it down. Most motherboards are different. The next thing is assembling the rest of the pieces inside the computer itself. So what I'm putting together first is the DVD-ROM drive, and being able to put that in there. And then I can either put in the media card slot or the hard drive or the power supply. But the thing about building computers is you have to be wary of how all the parts fit together. Like some computer cases, you have to put the power supply in first, otherwise it won't fit. Especially with computer cases with fans on top. If you have a computer case with a fan on top, you gotta make sure to put necessary parts in first. Luckily with this is a basic computer, and I can either put the power supply in now, or I can wait to put in the other drives first and then put in the power supply. So I just decided to use the power supply and put it in after I put in the DVD-ROM drive. Now the next thing I'm putting in is the media card slot, and on the sides of the media card slot and also the DVD-ROM drive, there's little holes for the screws. So what you got to do is you got to line up the holes with the holes on the computer case and screw those in. And the next thing, I'm going to put on the fan before it gets a little bit too crowded. Now you want to make sure the airflow blows out the back. So what typically happens in a computer is you suck the air in from the front, cool off the hot pieces, and blow it from the back. And so there was a little arrow on the fan that was pointing in a just certain direction. So I just making sure that that was pointing in the back. And with these screws, these are different on the fan screws. They actually kind of embed themselves inside. So you got to make sure that you screw in those screws. Now what I'm doing right now is I'm plugging in the different plugs onto the motherboard. So what happens is the power supply powers the motherboard, and then on the motherboard there's little slots for mini powers. One that goes to the CPU fan, another one goes to the back of the fan, and so the motherboard actually has power that powers these little fans that come off of it. Now what I'm doing, this case is pretty easy with the parts involved because they are color coded. So the blue goes in the blue, yellow goes in the yellow, brown goes in the brown, etc., etc. I have built computers where it isn't color coded, and what you do is you just read the manual on how to set things up. Usually it'll say the power and reset button goes on certain slots on the motherboard, but this was pretty easy. And what I'm doing right now is I am putting the RAM onto the computer. Now with the RAM, there's a long side and a short side. So if you take a look at the RAM slots, you'll see a long side and a short side. Just make sure to fit those in the appropriate slot. If it's not going in, don't force it. Just make sure to jiggle it a little bit to make sure that the short side is on the short side and the long is on the long. And then when you press down on the edges, it should snap into place, which makes it a lot easier. Now this piece that I'm putting on right now is the hard drive. So the hard drive, on one side it is metal, and on the other side it has like the silicon microchip side, and that's usually the side that they have the screws on, but you never know. I've seen it on both sides. And what you do is you go ahead and screw that in, and then you're able to go ahead and connect it using the SATA cables. So earlier I mentioned that we had the SATA. Now there's SATA 1, 2, and 3. Basically the difference between those is SATA 3 is the most current technology of SATA, so it's up to 6 gigabits per second transfer, which is awesome. It's super fast. It's what you needed. The blue cord, I believe, is a SATA 3, and the orange is a SATA 2, I believe. And now I'm putting on the little wireless network card that came with it. There's a slot to go ahead and put it on the motherboard. And I'm just putting all the extra knick-knack pieces back together. That piece right there holds the NIC card into place. And that's basically how you build a computer. Here's the front cover that we'll go ahead and put on and make everything look nice and pretty. And then we'll go ahead and put on the side. I hope you guys enjoyed watching me build a computer together and trying to explain things along the way.